This episode of the Adventure Jogger is brought to you by Travis Lone Car, Kilted Hasher, April Thunberg, and Carla Graves, and the rest of our awesome Patreon crew. And of course, you, the wonderful listener. The Adventure Jogger, a podcast about trail and ultra running. Meet fascinating runners from the front, middle, and back of the pack, sharing inspiring and funny stories about life and running. Running should be fun, and so should running podcasts. I'm your host, Stephen Kornhaus, and this is the Adventure Jogger. Well, on today's episode of the Adventure Jogger podcast, I've got a guest who is a personal finance guru, a trail and ultra runner, and apparently a math wizard as well, and multiple YouTube channels I just found out. So we're going to talk all things running. We'll probably talk a little bit of YouTube as well. But I am super excited to have Brad Finn on the podcast. Welcome, Brad.
Stephen, what's up, man? Thank you so much. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. I've been watching your videos for longer than you know. And, it's kind of cool when things like this come full circle. And I'm super pumped, man. Thank you. No better way to spend my Friday night.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man, for sure. It's I always seem to, good chats with everybody, of course, but especially people in like the YouTube space that, or share a lot of commonalities. It always turns out to be a really good conversation. So before we dive in, to anything specific, I really just kind of want to hear your running journey. Like, how did you get involved in the sport of running? Like, what led you there?
I think just a need to always want to be moving. I grew up, I was an athlete my whole life. I was never excelled in one particular sport. Coming from Long Island was a hotbed in lacrosse, like Northeast. So I played lacrosse pretty competitively. That was like my main go-to, but I was always a mover. I loved being outside. I was just always that type of kid. And running in sports was always a punishment. So I was never the fastest guy, but I really just liked being active. And that led into my mid-20s or even my early 20s. But, as we come out of college and we stop playing sports, that team sport aspect kind of goes away. So at this point, it was one of those where I saw late at night on like ESPN2 at 3:00 in the morning, this Ironman. And I said to myself, this is absolutely crazy. I said, I want to do that one day. And, you tell somebody about it, especially before the days of the internet, before Ironman was as popular as it is. Then they did this, and it was the Hawaii Ironman. And my friends in my early 20s, like, you are out of your mind. Long story short, I was working part-time in a paint store at the time, and I brought it up to this guy I was working with. I'm like, there's this thing. And he's like, oh yeah, I've done one. And I was like, get out of here. And this guy ended up being my mentor and got me into the sport of triathlon. And that's really where I think that's where the endurance side, but it also taught me the enjoyment of being active outside of team sports. Running was probably still my weakest. Living on the ocean, I've always been a strong swimmer, surfer, just by nature. The bike, you could be a good ride. We used to ride our bikes around town. So I knew how to ride a bike. Yeah. Running was never really one of my strong suits. And I know now I never really trained at it. And I was living a really unhealthy lifestyle, which that unhealthy lifestyle ended up winning into my mid to late 20s.
Oh, wow.
And I got hit hard by alcohol and drugs and things like that. And I became a shadow of my former self really all through my 30s. And it got bad. And I always knew that I needed to make a change, but it's hard to make that change, especially at this time. I was an entrepreneur. I owned a brewery, so drinking was really easy for me to do. And I had to teach. I'm a school teacher by day, so I had summers off I had no responsibilities over the summer except for being a beach bum and surfing and drinking and hanging out. Right. And then I found myself one day pushing like 240, 250 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I knew I was a fat kid. My wife loves me. She knows who she married. She didn't really care too much. But I said, I got to make some changes. And I started like dabbling in like a mile streak. I think that was it. I'm like, I knew that consistency was going to be the key. I knew at least from Ironman in those days. Right. I always did better than guys that were fitter than me because they were manic. They were all over the place. They would train hard and then they'd fall off. But I was always good at just staying consistent. I was never fast, but I got out there and I'm like, I know that if I can start maybe a little mile streak, things like that, I think that's going to be really, really good. And that's really how I got back into running. Just like, I need to make a change. And I did the mile streak for a couple months and I started to see results. I started to feel really, really good. I never had any aspirations of doing ultra marathons. I didn't even know really about the sport of trail running. I hadn't had that moment where I saw UTMB on the internet yet, so to speak. And yeah, so I just started doing that. And then I was like, I'm going to do a marathon because I had done marathons and Ironman before, things like that, but I never really
Sure.
trained and buckled down for one. And I was talking with a buddy who I knew ran, and he's like, well, I'm going to do this 50K ultra marathon. And I was like, tell me more. And yeah, he set me up into a trail run 50K here on Long Island. And it goes from the Long Island Sound across the entire island down to the ocean.
Oh, wow.
And he gave me like a pretty basic generic training plan. I was able to stay consistent with it. And by the time I got to that race, that was probably like 6 months later, I decided that I was going to go sober, clean and sober. And that obviously helped my running a bunch.
Yeah.
I stayed consistent. I started meeting people in the trail community and I did that 50K. I realized I didn't have to run on the roads and worry about getting hit by cars and things like that. And yeah, 3 years later, here we are, training for hundreds and, running 80 to 100 miles a week and still clean and sober 2 years later, down over 100 pounds. And, I can't, it feels like only yesterday. It really does.
Right.
I owe a lot to it, but yeah, just a need to just want to change and be more of a version of my younger self. My kids definitely helped push me in that direction. Somebody told me like something cliche once, like if somebody waved the magic wand and you had to switch places with your kid, like what kind of life are you going to give them? And
Interesting.
I'm like, damn, my kids would be screwed if they switched spots with me. They really would. And I took that really, really seriously. Had a really good conversation with my wife who supported me. And I think the success I owe to everything is my sobriety. And so I think I got into running to change who I was, but I continued to run and I continue to get better at running because of my sobriety.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's a lot there. We're gonna have to unpack all that.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a school teacher, man. I'm a chatter. So you
that was
softball
great, man.
like that. I'm gonna knock it out of the park.
That was awesome. So like Ironman triathlon, like how long did you do the whole triathlon scene?
So I did my first triathlon. I'm gonna go deep with you here. I did my first triathlon on April 13th, 2008, and I know the date.
Oh, wow.
It was the 5-year anniversary of losing my older brother.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I was living in Arizona, going to Arizona State University at the time for my master's, and I knew I wanted to do one, and I saw that date, and it was like I was on the fence for a while because signing up for an Ironman is a really big deal, especially when you've never done anything in endurance.
Right.
I saw that date on the actual 5-year anniversary. I was like, I'm going to raise some money. We raised a ton of money for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It was
nice.
And I did that race April, and then they changed the race to November because it was so hot in the first couple of years they had it.
Oh,
so they changed the Arizona race to November. I was living there. I'm like, double down. Let's do it.
Right.
And at that time, my friends were watching me do it. They were like, I kind of want to do that. They signed up for Ironman Lake Placid that July right after I did it. And I'm like, all right, just like I'm doing now. Like I can't not race. If you're racing, I'm always down. I'm always ready. So I ended up doing like 3 Ironmans in the course of a year and a half. And then I went down to the sprint distance because it's expensive. And I was starting my teaching career, my master's and things like that. It takes a lot to train for an Ironman, a lot of time. And if you want to trigger people later on, ask me which is harder, ultra or triathlon. And then I gave it up for a couple years. And when I first met my wife, she was like, I can't believe you used to do this stuff because she knew drunk Brad, and that was, backyard athletic. I'm the guy that like wins cornhole and wins horseshoes and like it can just do all the things, never excelled. And I said, I don't know what, like, I'll show you. And I ended up doing one in 2016. So I went from 2008, 2009 doing 3 quick. And
Yeah.
then a bunch of smaller distances, had some fun with it, got into strength. I opened a CrossFit in 2011. So I did that for a little bit.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, yeah. And then I got back into it and I did Ironman Boulder, which I don't
Oh,
think is
cool.
an Ironman anymore. I might have been
Yeah,
one
I
of the
don't think so.
last years to do it. And it was crazy because it was like they start school kind of early. I think it was like early August. And
Yeah,
the
usually.
transition was like in the high school like football field, and they had like they were getting ready to go to school, so like the football
Oh,
team was
wow.
like practicing around the bike racks. But yeah, I did that race in 2016, got through it by the skin of my teeth, and I said, you know, that day I was like, I'm retiring from the Ironman, I'm never doing it
Right.
again. And then here I am. I kind of want to do one
Really?
because I feel I'm in the best shape of my life, and
Yeah.
I always did okay in Ironman, but I think just with general knowledge and a little bit of old man strength and a little bit of determination, I think I could smoke an Ironman right now.
Well, I've heard from a lot of people that do Ironman that basically the run is where a lot of people can make up time because pretty much anybody can get on a bike and bike
Mm-hmm.
decently, and with some training, you can get pretty good. You might not be one of
Yeah.
those elite, like 5 hour, guys or whatever, or 4 hour, but that and swimming, you can definitely, swimming is also I've heard is one of the more difficult things. If you're not a really
Right.
experienced swimmer, it's very hard to get fast at swimming. But now that you've got this endurance and this from running all these miles, yeah, you could probably smoke it.
It's so true. The gap, I think of it as like the gaps from the medium, like the people that are average to the people that are below average in each discipline. Like, for example, I was considered a really, really good swimmer. I swam like an hour, where
Oh,
like a really bad swimmer is swimming 90 minutes. So
yeah,
there's 30 minutes between me considered probably above average to below average, 30 minutes.
right,
Where, in a marathon at the end of the day after a 112-mile bike ride, you have
right.
guys that can jog a 4-hour marathon, 9:08 pace. But if you're walking, you're going 7, 8 hours. So the difference between a mid pack and a below average is now 3, 4 hours on the run. And that's kind of what happened to me. I'd get out of the water
Yeah,
like top of my age group. And then it was just a day of like, I would hold my own on the bike, like you mentioned. It wasn't super fast, but like not a ton. And then
right.
I would end up just like jogging a marathon, and people would just pass me like it was a
Just lose
parade.
on,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now I'm like, I could probably swim about the same. I could probably ride maybe a little faster, not much, but I would get probably 3 hours back on the marathon.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if I did it now.
Well, what was your fastest Ironman you ever did?
13, 14. So,
Okay.
and that was in that November one. So my slowest was
Okay.
in Boulder, and I just got in under the cutoff like 16:50.
Okay.
My first one ever, I went like 14:49, just under 15 hours, but yeah, 13 hours and 14 minutes. And if I had a goal for doing one now, it wouldn't be like qualify for Kona or whatever. I can't afford, even if I qualified for it.
Gosh, right.
But I always wanted to finish while the sun was still up. And
Oh, yeah.
and that's like right around 12 hours for most places, especially these are summer events kind of, so it was up longer. So if I ever dabbled with one again, that would be the goal. Get it. I want to get in while the sun is still up.
Yeah. Well, man, if you can pick up 3 hours on the run, it sounds like you got it in the bag.
Yeah, I hope so.
Right.
One day we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, have you kept up training as far? I know you cycle some still. I've seen, I follow you on Strava.
Yeah.
I've seen you cycle and run, but have you kept up swimming? Do you do that still?
I never really trained swimming, so like I'm kind of just like the same swimmer. Like I live on the water, like I said,
Okay.
water sports, surfing, and things like that. Just being in the water, pool with the kids. Like I was always comfortable in the water, and I think that's with triathlon. That's a big deal. Like being comfortable in the water. I'm the guy that
in open water, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love the wrestling match. I'm that guy that's pulling people's goggles off and grabbing people's ankles. I'm that guy. But yeah, no, I think I'd be all right. And I still ride. I definitely don't ride as much. I'm looking forward to riding more in the off season. I definitely use it more as a cross training activity now. And I used to ride on Zwift a lot, which is like an online like program, and I did that a bunch. And I have a love for the bike, but it just got here on Long Island, just got really, really dangerous. And
yeah, oh my gosh, I can imagine.
I loved being inside, but the freedom that trail running brought away from not only people, because we're heavily populated, but also getting off the road. There was only a few places that I could go, like maybe a state park here or there, where I could go ride for a while and not feel like the more you do things, obviously, the more you're going to hear things. But I felt like I was just hearing like every weekend somebody getting hit by a car,
Yeah.
and very rarely being the cyclist's fault, or just the hatred that some people have for cyclists, like
Oh my gosh.
I was just getting honked at, people throwing stuff out the window. It just became not fun. I love cycling probably more than I like running, if I'm being honest. But
Oh wow.
The liability that went along with it, and then the freedom I found in trail. I yeah, like I love trail. I love trail.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned you kind of struggled for a while with alcohol and drugs and you got sober. So what date is your sobriety date? Like, what date do you remember
Yeah.
that? I'm
So
sure you do.
I'm coming up on 2 years on Christmas. So
Christmas.
I had tried to stop so many times, but I know now in hindsight, I stopped. And I'm not preaching sobriety for people. I want to make that very, very clear. Like, my wife has a very healthy relationship with alcohol, and I know people that can have a glass of wine at dinner.
Right. Sure.
I can't. So I'm not telling people they should be so. I just want to make
Everybody's
it very
right.
clear.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a drinking problem. Nobody
Right.
has asked me to start drinking again. But I tried to stop so many times, and I realized that I was always stopping for somebody else. I was always stopping because I thought that's what my wife wanted. I was
Yeah.
always stopping because, I had kids now and I shouldn't. And just like with anything, if your heart isn't in it and you're doing anything for somebody else, it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
And I would go a little bit, and then I tried to maybe I'll just drink on the weekends, or I'll try just drinking on special occasions. But hell, when you want to drink, you'll find a special occasion every single day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm a celebration drinker. So I wasn't like depressed. I wasn't like drinking away my sorrows. I was like, it's happy hour. It's the 4th of July. I was finding friends. It's your birthday. I was pulling friends out on they're like, dude, I'm 38 years old. I don't need to go out on my birthday. I'm like, we're going out on your birthday.
Right.
And I finally was like, pretty much I was like 6 months into this run streak.
Yeah.
And I was just feeling so good. And I think my wife was talking about like, yeah, you really gave yourself a gift in this running thing. Like, you're getting your life back. And I said, you want to know what? I'm going to give myself the ultimate gift for Christmas, and I'm going to go sober. And I'm going to go, I want to do it for me, and I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to find mentors, and now I have mentors in sobriety. I'm going to use meetings if I need to. And I woke up Christmas Day, and I've been sober since then. So yeah, coming up on 2 years.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you found that intrinsic motivation to drive you through it. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, we've all struggled with something in the past, whether it's alcohol, drugs, pornography, even just cursing. For some people, they really want to stop cursing.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do it unless you have that internal desire that you have a strong feeling about, because it's just not going to last. You might do it for 2 weeks and then nope.
And a lot of the cliche reasons why, like, I never stopped, right? Of like, I won't be fun, or nobody's going to like me, or I'm going to lose friends. I found out immediately that more people wanted to be around me when I was sober than when I was drinking.
Oh.
And I found out I had a better personality. I had more to give. I was just a better person overall. I was a better husband. Like I just mentioned, nobody asked me to go back to drinking. And I first had to go through those couple of moments when I was telling people, and you tell the people that are closest to you first. So like, I'd say to my brothers, like, hey man, like, I think it's for real this time. And they were never like, oh, here we go again, or like, oh, I've heard that before. My brothers immediately from day one were like, you let me know. And like, I think I went to my brother's on New Year's that first week later, and he had non-alcoholic beers in the fridge for me.
Nice.
Like,
that's awesome, man.
It was, they knew, they knew it was time. They knew I need, like, I gave up a lot of money. I walked away from the brewery. I gave away a 7-figure income brewery.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how important it was to me. And I said to my partner at the time, I said, bud, I got to go, man. Like this, I'm not going to make it. I lost both of my parents young to lifestyle choices.
Oh,
I'm like, I just had my second kid. I'm like, dude, I can't. And he was like, I totally get it. And now years later, I go and see him, and he's like, I'm so proud of you. And like, those are the things that keep me going. Cause I just had on my Instagram, I talked about, I just had a really rough month. September was very, very hard for my sobriety. And I made sure that I had a lot of people to go to and get through, because between that and then on top of training for races, which could be super stressful, and throw in
Yes.
some niggles here and there. I know you're injured. Your mind must be going crazy. It was a lot.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, definitely. You got to surround yourself with good people that
Yep.
got your back when you're trying to do something. That's
Mhm.
that's awesome, man. Coming up on 2 years. Well, congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
It's a heck of a streak. So you started the running with a run streak. It's ironic. I'm actually wearing my run streak shirt right now. Was this a streak that you just decided one day I'm going to start running, or did you join some kind of streak group like the Runners World Run Streak or something?
So at the time, I had a podcast with another personal finance buddy of mine, and we were always just talking about things that were like super easy to like do, but we never did. And we use it in terms
Right.
of like just like staying debt free, living frugally, below our means. Like that's what we kind of talked about on the podcast. And I was like, you want to know something that to me that sounds so easy, and I've tried it a few times, but it's impossible. I'm like, running at least 1 mile a day for a year. And he's like, dude, you could do that. And I'm like, I know I could, but just like a year's a long time to avoid sickness, avoid a hurricane,
Right.
avoid something. And he was the first one that was like, well, let's talk about it every week on the podcast. Let's see how long you could go for.
Nice.
And
Yes,
I
accountability.
so I think that accountability factor and the drive of like knowing that I'd always wanted to run through all those Ironmans, I had never run 365 miles total for the year. Like that's how little I trained for these things. I always just got by on general fitness, which is why the marathon took me so long. But I think had an extrinsic goal of getting 365 miles for the year, even if I could say I ran at least a mile per day.
Right.
And 1 month led to a couple months, led to this, that, and the other thing. And I ended up ending the streak at 286 days. I had a really bad ankle roll. And I think that might have been one of the first times that I reached out to you on Instagram, because I think you and I rolled our ankles about the same time.
Yeah.
And I had the streak going, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I remember your advice at the time was like, man, like this is a long game. You could always start the streak in a couple of weeks. If your ankle's effed up, heal the ankle. And that was like one of the hardest, because I knew how manic I was, and I'm all in or nothing. And I'm like, man, this streak is what's really keeping me going. And I had to find external motivation now the streak was over. Right. And that's when I started signing up for bigger races. Like, okay, as soon as I'm back on my feet, and I don't have to tell you, like an injury will make you appreciate your fitness and make you appreciate your ability to exercise more than anything in the world will. So that, so that ankle roll and losing that streak was probably a blessing now in hindsight, because I probably would have just kept running a mile or two every week. And it was more like, wow, if I take a rest day, I can really boost my mileage, and I can go for this, and I don't have to worry about streaks. And if I get injured, I can stop. I never need to, because even in those 286 days, I pushed through things that I probably shouldn't have ran on those days. I ran through COVID, things like that. Like, So it was actually, I'm personally not a fan of streaks anymore, but I know that for some people, they need them just like I needed them to get going. It was the flame to get the fire burning, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've got friends I met during this run streak here. I started on Thanksgiving Day, 2017, and did like a 40-day run streak till like the new year, whatever it was. And I kept up going 76 days. Then like you, I kind of got to the point where I was like, man, I don't want to go put my clothes on to go run 1 mile, because I just ran, 15 miles yesterday. And it's like, this is supposed to be a rest day, but no, I got to go put clothes on and go do this streak. It's like, I don't want to do this. And I stopped, but I got friends that are still going from that same time, 5, 6, whatever. I don't know. Shoot, was that 7 years later?
But they're still going.
Like still going a mile a day. And like,
I don't know if you've ever seen Caleb East. He's like the unlazy runner on Instagram, but our streaks were very, very similar. And like now he's on like day 900. And I'm like, oh man, if I would have kept going, I'd be coming up on 1,000 days as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, was your streak a mile a day? Doesn't matter how you do it, or was it like has to be outside? Must be an outside mile.
No, I did. However, it had to be done. I did. Not many, because at that time I didn't have a treadmill. But I probably did. I did a couple. There was like maybe like a fall hurricane where it's like, come on, man.
Yeah, sure.
Or like we might have had a blizzard. There was something in there. I definitely read some of them inside.
Yeah, I did mine the same way too. So I know
Yeah.
some people that do like, it's got to be outside no matter what. You got to do a mile outside or it doesn't count. So
Yeah,
I wasn't that hardcore.
as they said in the
So,
Matrix, stuff like that is just a girl in a red dress, man. It's not
exactly.
that big of a deal.
Yeah. So you got sober and really like dove. Well, you had already like dive. What's the correct word?
Dove in. Dove in?
Dove in. You'd already dived into to running very seriously, but even you continued to get more serious with running and signed up for your first ultra marathon.
Mhm.
So when was that first ultra marathon?
So that was on I want to say so I'm just trying to get my year straight because gosh knows I don't even know what year it is. It was 2023. It was
Okay,
April
so just last year.
2023, mid-April 2023. Yeah,
Okay.
I went 50K, 100K, 100 miler in less than a year.
Wow. Yeah.
And yeah, no, it was and that was the one that was here on Long Island. Yeah, just last year. And
Okay.
it was an awesome gateway. And like I said, I got hooked and like many people, I feel like you either love it or you hate it, but I finished that race and I signed up for the Grindstone 100K like within that week.
Nice. Yeah. The
And
Grindstone's a good race. Yeah.
yeah, I was it's funny how like naive I was, but when I did the 50K, just like a lot of people, like I got on YouTube and I watched every single ultra running video I could possibly find. And UTMB kept coming up. And I was like, wow. And I did some research on how to do this. And for Stones, that was really the only race in the Northeast.
Right.
And it was also the first year that UTMB was taking it over from the locals. So and I didn't know like that was a bad thing at the time.
Yeah.
But so I had like this a little bit of a perfect storm. And then as a school teacher, it ended up being up on a Jewish holiday that we had off for a couple days. So I
Oh,
wasn't
nice.
gonna have to take any personal days from work, which all those things kind of aligned and it was drivable. It was a long drive, but I didn't have to fly.
Yeah.
I had some days off. It was a new race. It was UTMB. I was going to get some stones. So yeah, that's what led me to sign up for the Grindstone 100K, which was September of last year. So just about a year ago.
Well, how did that first 50K go? I know you talked a little bit about it, but I mean, was it a experience where you were so trained it went perfectly, or did you have some low moments, some bonks in the 50K?
I had a great training block, but the ankle sprain that ended that streak was 5 weeks before
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So I the first time I ran after the ankle sprain, which happened in mid-March. So yeah, early March, about 5 weeks before, I ran like maybe 2 days before just to see if I could like just get a jog
Sure.
going.
Test it. Yeah.
I taped it up good and I was like, can I do this? And I was able to get through with a little bit of pain. My brother's an ortho. He's like, Brad, it's been a while. You're not going to like, unless your real injury, your real risk is if you re-roll it again and
Right.
it's worse because it's so unstable. But I'd been going to PT. I've been strengthening it, like I said, with his guidance. And I felt confident that like, dude, I taped this thing up like I was in a cast. And it was not going anywhere. And it was
Looked
flat.
like offensive lineman out there.
Yes. And it was a flat race. I think there's only like 1,100 feet for the
Oh, wow.
and it was all in the beginning. The North Shore of Long Island's pretty rocky, but the South Shore is flat as a pancake, which has been a detriment as I found out later. But yeah, no, I got
So
I got through it in I want to say like 7 hours and 20 minutes, which
Okay.
my first one, I was happy. I got through.
Yeah, absolutely.
My ankle
Definitely.
held up. I think my ankle holding up was a really, really awesome deal. It was April 15th. That's my brother's birthday now that I think about it, because we went to
Yeah.
his birthday party after. And like, you know, the cliche, like you do something, then you walk into a room and nobody knows anything about it. And you just want to scream
Right.
like, hey guys, I don't know if you know this, but this morning I ran 32 miles. And meanwhile, it was
Right.
his birthday. Nobody cared. I just sat
Right.
like all sore. And like, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I had a great race. I had an awesome experience. And once again, in hindsight, it's probably better off that I wasn't like in perfect shape, because I probably would have went into it with way more expectations.
Right.
And as we know, sometimes you don't meet those expectations, and I might have had a worse experience. I think just knowing that I was going to go out there and try and complete the distance, try and do something I've never done before. I just lost my dad, so it was like a little bit emotional, and I was like, let's just get out there. And then now in hindsight, seeing like with my brother, whose birthday it was that day, him seeing it, he started running that day, and he now runs ultra marathons as well. So it's amazing how even in a short time, like things can. So for those reasons, it was a perfect day.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
then how did Grindstone go? Because like you mentioned, part of Long Island, incredibly flat, and Grindstone is not a flat race. So how did that one go for you?
I didn't
That was
make
the rainy year too, right?
yeah, it was a tropical storm and we got down there and it was September, so it was supposed to be in like the mid to high 50s, maybe
Yeah.
low 50s at the peaks, but 100K, so all during the day, wasn't really supposed to see any night. And then the week of, we had a tropical storm coming up and they were calling for huge gusts and in the 30s at the peaks, even during the day.
Oh man.
So first and foremost, coming out of summer here, heat and humidity going into that was big. I definitely wasn't as prepared. I didn't know about like necessarily training for course specificity, and I know how important that is now. My
Right.
volume was awesome. I was running 70 miles a week, 75
Oh, wow.
miles a week. I was I was self-coached, but I was asking a lot of people, but I did not train for the course. I looked at the vert and I saw the vert was like 11,000. So I'm like, okay, as long as I run 11,000 a week, I should be okay. Maybe have a couple 15,000, which I did.
Oh, nice.
But what happened in Grindstone is all of that 11,000 feet pretty much comes in 3 climbs.
Right.
And I had never grinded 1,000 feet per mile for 3 miles.
Yeah.
I've never done an hour, a 90-minute just grind uphill. And by the last one, I was kind of broken from it. I just wasn't prepared. And
Yeah.
I ended up coming into one of the last aid stations with seconds to go. Like I hear my wife calling up the hill, Brad, you got to run. And I get in and I'm like, all right, I can do this. But I was getting really, really cold. The rain, just the night.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
I'd slowed down on that grind. And like I said, I'm saying I was not prepared. And I ended up missing the cut by like 20 minutes at the finish line. So I got to the finish line. They gave me a mug for finishing, but
Oh man.
I didn't get the stones. And there was a couple of
Oh,
frustrating things. The course ended up being 68 miles, and
yeah.
it wasn't my watch. That's what everybody got. But in hindsight, the GPX file had 67 miles on it. So I should have
Right.
known that. It had the tightest cutoffs of any 50-mile or up distance in America, which it still does.
Oh wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this year they ended up extending the cut by an hour, like I think 14 hours into the race, because the DNF rate would have been like over 70%
Oh my gosh.
because it started raining late at night and
Right.
or later in the afternoon. And I coached 3 athletes that did that race. And the one guy, I had one athlete that was fighting time cutoffs, and I knew that he was going to see his watch and know that the quote time cutoff had happened and he was going to stop. So I'm like calling his wife, like, you got to let him know he has an extra hour, because they weren't telling the athletes out on course unless you got to an aid station.
Oh wow.
But enough about that. Yeah. So I wasn't prepared. I missed it. I would love to go back in hindsight and be like, if I had that cutoff, if I had this year's cutoff, I would have made it. But once
Right.
again, you take the highs with your lows. I learned a lot. I learned
Yeah.
about training to the course. And when I stepped up to canyons for the 100-miler, like I trained, my mileage was almost the same as Grindstone, but my mileage was intentional and my mileage was for the canyons course, and my long runs were on similar terrain and things like
Right.
that. And even with similar volume, I was able to be a lot more successful because of it. And now
Right.
going into Javelina, I understand the importance of, like, it's not just time on feet and it's not just mileage. It's really in a road marathon or even a road ultra, maybe, because the factors aren't as high.
Right. Right.
But for these big races, I tell people all the time, like, understanding every inch of the course is way more important, in my opinion, than like knowing like what your volume is and how many miles you run and what pace you run at, things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. The training specificity is so important. And that's something that's
Yeah.
really come more clear to me since living in Colorado. Like, because last year I went back to Tennessee to run the No Business 100 again in the opposite direction. And out here in Colorado, I mean, we've got beautiful trails, miles, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of miles of gorgeous trails and lots of altitude. But all of our climbs here are similar to what you said with Grindstone, where it's a 3 mile climb and
Mhm.
you're just gaining 3,000 feet. Like, it's just, there's no 200-foot rollers or 500-foot rollers. It's all crazy. And when I went back to Tennessee, I think the largest climb that they had on the no business course was something like maybe 800 feet. And that was a shorter, punchy climb. It was steep. So it's like I was kind of like, oh man, this is different. Like, this is a lot different than grinding out for 2 hours on a climb.
You got to get on a treadmill to find flat. I got to get on a treadmill to get burned. Yeah, no, it's so true. And yeah, but I mean, if I would have finished Grindstone and I would have done great, like I would have probably failed at Canyons because I needed to learn those tough lessons. I needed to learn like that I wasn't invincible. And, I needed to learn the importance of others. I ended up bringing on a coach for Canyons and things like that.
Oh, nice.
If I would have had a coach for Grindstone, that knowledge and that expertise from a coach of knowing specificity of the course, like I would have trained differently, where I was just Googling stuff and reading. It was like, okay, pack on miles. I'm like, okay, I can run miles. I can do 2 a days. I can things like that. But I never once did a climb on the treadmill at 15% for more than 30 minutes, and
yeah,
man, when I was at mile 46, there was a 3,000-foot climb, 3 miles, and it was pouring rain and it was dark.
Oh my gosh.
And there was a 9-mile stretch in between aid stations, and I brought a liter of water and like two packs of 2 gels, thinking 9 miles can take me 2.5 hours tops. And it's taking me like almost 5. And it was a tough part of the race for sure.
Right. Definitely. Well, it sounds like you learned a lot of lessons from there, which is like you said, that can kind of be a blessing in disguise. You may have well, I guess, is it technically considered a DNF since you missed the cutoff?
Yeah, I did get a DNF.
It is, okay, so you did that, but you still learned.
Maybe it doesn't say DNF. It says like out. I think on the actual website it's out of time, but I did not. I did not get any stones. So it was like
an official finisher, basically, or something.
Yeah, and the worst. I'll tell you the worst part. All these things you learn after the fact as you learn this sport. At the time, I'm like, I'm good. I'm a better man. I've trained. I'm sober. I'm happy. I don't need this finish. And then I go to sign up for another race, and it's like, oh yeah, you need a qualifying race, or you need a race that's 100K or more. You need this. And I'm like, that race would have allowed me to enter into so many other races. But then again, that was probably good too, because I didn't need to be going in and doing 20 races like I probably wanted to. Everything works out, Steve. It all works out at the end.
It does. It's the long game, like we said earlier.
Exactly.
It's the long game. So
sure is.
Well, speaking of that long game, you then, like you said, you did the Canyons in April of this year, the 100-mile distance, and that was your first time attempting 100 miles, right?
Yes.
Okay. And how did that one go as your first hundreds? Can either, like, you see some people that are just freaks in nature and go out and run like a 17-hour first 100. Then you have other people that, are go through crazy pain and it sucks and there's pain. I mean, like, how did your first 100 go?
I think it went well, and lessons definitely came. I think being a school teacher, knowing the importance of like looking at failures and figuring it out. I learned a lot that I've brought into this one, but I think I'm a go big or go home. And I think people always like, why Canyons? I chose Canyons once again for my work. It ended up right in the middle of my spring break, which was awesome. Once again, I didn't have to take personal days. Nice. I was able to go out there for a couple of days before. It was at the tail end of my spring break. So I actually flew out on like Monday, and I was there for a week, flew out my Pacers and things like that, and had a grand old time. But the biggest thing also too, like I knew that it was a higher profile race on the West Coast. So I knew that I'd bump in. I'm a little bit of a fanboy sometimes. So I knew I'd bump into some famous runners and things like that. People out there training on the Western States course.
Definitely.
And then knowing that Western States was a lot harder to get into, I wanted to go out there and see what Auburn was like. You get a little bit of FOMO when you see that and the historic parts of Auburn and how big that is in the ultra scene. So there was definitely a draw there, but it had 19,000 feet with 23,000 feet of downhill. And my biggest fear, especially when I brought on a coach, he's like, yeah, your treadmill is great, but like you need to get eccentric downhill or your quads are going to blow up. So definitely. I ended up doing a lot of driving up north to make sure that I can do that like once a month and get that in. And I really want to say that I think having the coach helped me be as successful as I was in the race, also from a mental standpoint as well, like that confidence and eliminating the stress of thinking like, am I doing it right? Like I'm very good at doing what I'm told. I'm very coachable from my athletic days. I never once thought like, is Mike giving me enough? Or is this doesn't feel right?
Yeah.
I was just like, when you take on a coach, you got to trust him. I put my trust in him. And I was like, if I do what this dude tells me, I'm going to be okay. And I carried that into the race. And I carried that into 40 miles in, 50 miles in, into those first low points. And I trained for running overnight. Like he had me waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning and running from 1 to sunrise
Oh,
and
nice.
things like that. And there were certain parts that I was terrified of. The year before, it was like 100 degrees, unseasonably hot. And
Incredibly hot. Yeah.
this is an early season race, like kind of the opposite of grindstone coming out of winter. I'm like, dude, I don't do well in the heat as it is. If it's 100, I'm screwed. It ended up being cloudy, a little bit drizzly and overcast for the first day and a half, which was
Nice.
awesome. I've always been a little bit weak mentally. I still am a little bit. It's my biggest fear going into my next race. But I PR'd my 100K in that race. I had a really good night session. I was on pace for about a 26, 27 hour finish. I
Nice.
made a critical nutrition flaw at mile 72. There was a water only aid station at mile 80 that I thought had food. So I didn't bring enough out.
Oh,
So I
no.
went from 72 to 88, 72 to 88 or 89 without any really, just I had like 2 or 3 gels on me just to get me to that, what I thought
Oh,
was an
man.
aid station. Just a rookie mistake, man. I just didn't do my due diligence. And by the time I got to that 90-mile mark, I bonked. And now at this point, I saw my goal times go away. So when expectations go away, you really enter those lows. And I just felt like I just felt like a loser. And then like I'm like, all these people on the internet, my 1,000 followers on
Right.
Instagram, I'm like, they're all going to think I'm a fraud and I'm going to disappoint my coach. And I flew my wife here and my pacer's now going to be walking in with me. I think the last marathon took us like almost 5 or 6 hours, something like that, walking. But
Yeah.
but then, man, you see that finish line and it doesn't matter anymore. And I ended up coming
That's
in
right.
somewhere between 31 and 32 hours, maybe 32 hours sounds good.
Nice.
Which ended up being late afternoon and just the greatest experience. I got everything I wanted out of the 100. I got the humility, I got the highs, the lows, a little bit of hallucinations. I got, the moments where you're crying and you don't know why you're crying, and the pain that just all of a sudden just goes away when you see your family. And just, it was everything. When I was told that it's every human emotion in 24 hours, you think, and like I did Ironmans and I heard endurance sports are hard and I thought I knew what hard was.
Yeah.
And I wasn't somebody that was like, I mean, during the race, of course, I probably said a few times, I'm never doing this again. But by the time I got home and showered, the worst part of the race was I got poison ivy. I almost had to be hospitalized for poison oak and poison ivy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of people got banged up bad. I still have scars on my legs from how bad I had prednisone shots. That was the worst part of the race. Like my body, dude, let me tell you, my body healed. I was good to go. No problems. Like 3-4 days later, up, around, not wobbling. It took me almost 2.5 weeks before I could run again because of how bad the poison oak and the poison ivy was in my legs.
No clue poison ivy was a problem on that course. Oh my gosh.
And like I saw it early and I first tried to like skate around it early, but it's kind of like in a rainy race where you avoid the puddles for like 20 minutes. You're like, F it, I'm just going to go through a puddle and it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's when after a while, I'm like, you would just watch it like, and then it was raining. So like, of course, like you scratch your leg or something, you touch your face. I had it everywhere.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Great rate. That one, like, I don't really like tell people that Grindstone's one that I would personally go for, but I had a great experience at Canyons and they did a great job top to bottom. 8 stations were great. And yeah, it made me hungry for more. I got out of there and I'm
nice.
I want to do this again and I want to do it again quickly.
Yeah. Well, now I'm curious, is that the race where you filmed the, or you made the short on Instagram? I think it was that got like 1 million views or whatever it was. The what were you like, F this, F that? Like,
no. So that was, it used to be called the Squaw Peak 50. I think they call it SP 50 now or Snow Peak now, because it might have offended some people. So that was in Utah in early June. And I came off that race in end of April, kind of laid low May, got rid of this poison oak, felt good. And one of my buddies in sobriety was going to be in Utah, and a company that's been helping me so much is based out of there. And they're like, "Hey, you want an adventure? Come out." And I was like, "Okay, I'm totally down. I love it." And it's a 50 miler, and there was still snow, and it was going to go up high. And I'm like,
Nice.
"Yeah, I'll just go out." Once again, like thinking that just because I ran 100, I could just step up to the line of any course anywhere and be fine. Well,
Yeah.
no, like that course said, "Oh, that's cute," and it was 100 degrees, and it was
Oh, wow.
exposed, and it went up over 8,000 feet 3 times, which coming from sea level is no good. I landed the night before,
Oh, wow.
and man, from mile to I was saying on my podcast, like, I'm gonna go 12 hours. I'm gonna go 12 hours. I'm gonna light. No, dude, I didn't even get to the turnaround till like 8. I think I ended up finishing that race like 15, 16 hours, but
Yeah.
I I felt hypothermia. I got held at hypothermia in Grindstone. I thought hypothermia was bad. Dude, heat exhaustion is the worst. And
Oh,
these
100%.
dudes, these dudes, they dragged me up to the river, and they literally threw me in the river. And the one that's like F Nature, that one that got like
Yeah.
2 million views. Like that was before the turnaround, and it was an out and back it was a big climb up to 11,000 feet, and you came back. And I just saw all my friends that I was with that I thought I was fitter than coming back down. And right in the beginning of that video, you'll see a guy in there in a white t-shirt. He was on his way back down. And I should post that video with the real audio. And like what I was saying was, I just can't believe how much I'm suffering. And I feel so bad that you guys are going to have to wait so long for me at the finish line.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're friends. They didn't. But yeah, at mile 50, I was going to drop. And my pacer at the time, who I'd never met, Abby Storr, she has an amazing podcast as well, the 8th Lane podcast. And she's from Utah. And I was like, she was training for 100. And she's like, "Hey, I'll come run with you, man." Like, yeah, that's cool. So now I'm thinking, like, as I'm coming up to where she's going to pick me up at like mile 40, I'm like, I'm going to meet this girl, and I'm going to throw up my way and crawl my way to the finish. I'm going to be the biggest. She's never going to speak to me again. And she was the one filming all those things with me, laying in rivers, and we did what we could to cool my temperature. But I got to the finish line though. I'm going back.
Yeah.
But like I said, I didn't even look at the weather. I just was like, I did 100. Here's my belt buckle. I'm gonna go a 50 miler. You're gonna tease me with a 50 miler, and yeah, SP50 said, yeah, Brad. They said, "That's cute, Brad. Enjoy that." And yeah, no, that was a very humbling. That one made me want to quit ultra marathon more than the 100 did. And
Oh, wow.
in ways, it was harder than the 100 because of that lack of preparation and how I suffered. Canyons was harder, but I suffered exponentially more in SP50.
It's funny how that is, and specifically in trail, like trail and ultra. It's like you think,
Yeah.
yeah, I did 100. I got my buckle, and that's my instant, finish to any race lower than that. Now I can go do it easily. But then you forget about courses are so different. You've got all these weather variabilities. You've got the terrain. You've got the elevation. You've got the heat. Like all these things that just make something that you think, oh, yeah, it should be so easy, and it ruins you. It wrecks you and destroys you.
That's also what makes it great too, though, right?
It is. It really is. Like maybe it's just because we're type 2 people and we just love to suffer. I don't know, but it's a special thing. So you mentioned that your biggest fear in coming up for the javelina is mental weakness or your mental strength. That I think you said you lack mental strength at times.
Yeah.
What specifically is that, like where you get into a dark spot and you're just kind of struggling to pull yourself out of it, or what specifically is that worry?
I think I set the bar really, really high for myself, and I always have. And even back to being a kid. And I've found now in journaling and looking back, a lot of my lowest points in races have come from when I didn't either have a realistic goal and I didn't meet my expectations, or for whatever reasons, I didn't meet expectations. Like I went into canyons because when I went into canyons, I made myself a time goal of like 27, 28 hours. Not because I needed to necessarily make that time goal, but because I never wanted to be the guy that was like, I just want to finish. Where at the end of the day, that's really what it shouldn't have been. And it shouldn't have been, I just want to finish because I'm just going to be lazy and all I have to do is get to the finish line. I should have been saying like, I just want to get to the finish because getting to the finish is really freaking hard.
Yeah.
And I didn't manage expectations. And then SP50, I did not, my expectation was I'm going to walk into this thing and go 12 hours and I'm going to do that. Or things are just going to come easier. I train and I'm really fit. And I think that's been the major thing with my low spots. And I also have just always, and this goes back to like the drinking, was probably really based on like a lot of insecurities, right? I was using alcohol to mask insecurities and
Right.
mask the way I feel. And now there's no more humbling thing that will expose you more than ultra marathon, in my opinion. And I think I just got to these places mentally where I just don't believe in myself anymore. And when I was talking with somebody the other day about Javelina, we were talking about my fitness, which I think my fitness is great. And I do have a time goal for it. And I want to go sub 24 hours really bad. And I've been working to do that. I want that other bucket
Right.
that you get. But I think unlike before, I don't need 24. But I do know that physically, I'm probably a 20-hour guy, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I know that I have to manage the controllables, and things like the heat and it being
Right.
hot will just mess with my psychology. Like it'll be hot and I'll find myself saying like, well, it's nobody PRs when it's this warm. So I'm screwed right now. Instead of thinking like, just get through the day. It's going to cool down at night. So I'm really learning and focusing on putting things in this instead of like, oh man, I know I have weak ankles. My ankles are going to hurt. Now getting to the point where it's like, all right, your ankles are hurting. Good. We got there. Let's put that on the shelf and let's keep moving forward.
Right.
And that's been a major physically, man. I feel good. I'm not like flexing on it. Like I feel good. If I had a perfect mental, like if I had a day where I was super confident in myself mentally and I'd been doing this for years and it's coming with experience, I know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, it's going to be something that happened mentally. My nutrition is on point. I did a 6-hour race last weekend and that was race day prep nutrition, no GI, no nothing.
Nice.
I'm hungry. I'm handling 80 grams of carbs an hour. Like it's not a big deal. It's just going to be like, I don't know. It's going to be like that third loop where it's like, I'm going slow. I'm not going to get any faster. Do I want to keep going down this road of getting slower? Do I want to walk the last 20-mile loop? What are all these? Those are things that I'm really just trying to fight and know that I need to get through, as well as this would be the first time going no crew, no pacer.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just going for it. And I relied in canyons on my crew, my family, my brothers, my wife a lot. They dug me out of a couple holes. And so I also like know that, but because I've known that, it's something I've been working on the psychology of it. And I haven't been so hard on myself. Last night, for example, I had 8 miles on the schedule and I got to the end of the block and things just didn't feel right. And I'm 3/4 of a mile in and I'm like, F it, tonight's not the night. I'm going home.
Yeah.
And I know in the past I would have got home and pouted and been like, you're a loser. Like, this is not what you signed up for. But now I'm like, Brad, you can't have a perfect day every day. You got to be a little bit easier on yourself. And so rule 62, don't take yourself too damn seriously. And it's like, that's been a really, really big thing on top of physically that I think is going to hopefully make me really, really successful in 2 weeks when we dive into this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm curious with your goal setting. Do you give yourself like an A, B, and C goal, or is it only an A?
To be honest, I think I know what the answer should be, but I think it's really,
what's the real answer?
I think it's A or bust. I mean,
okay.
At least I know that if I finish the race, I'm going to PR because the cutoff is faster than canyons.
Okay.
So if I finish, I'm getting 100 PR. That would be freaking great.
What is the cutoff?
30 hours.
30. Okay.
Yeah. So I think 31, 32 in canyons, 30 hours with 7,000 feet. So I'm going to go 11,000 feet less. But old Brad would have been like, oh, it's flat. Like I've done my diligence. I know it's not an easy race. No races are easy. No 100s are easy.
It's still 100 miles. Yeah.
So I think, I have an A goal. And I think what's going to be different about this is I'm not going to think about that A goal until it's time to think about it. Like in canyons, I was starting to do the math on my finish time at like mile 30, or at mile 50 at the halfway point when I wasn't when I was at the halfway point, I wasn't at 13, 14 hours. I started saying, well, if I'm at 13, 14 hours now, I'm going to go 60, like I started doing that math where
Right.
I know now that I'm going half loop by half loop. I'm going to Jackass Junction and then I'm going back to the start. And I'm going to do that a bunch of times. And until it gets dark, I don't even need to care about what loop I'm on. I don't even need to care about any of those things. I need to care about keeping your body cool. I need to worry about managing expectations. I need to worry about nutrition, and I need to worry about having fun and just enjoying the process of training. Like, races are just opportunities to go showcase all the work you did. It's not about the finish. The finish doesn't matter. So I have an A goal. I want to go sub 24 hours. And I chose that A goal mostly because it's a cool milestone time. They have a separate medal if you go sub 24, which
nice.
They have the coolest medals around, in my opinion. So like I'm a guy that wears my buckles, so I would love to wear that one.
Yep.
And my buckle, actually, I will wear my buckles. Right now I wear my buckle. But I have that goal. But if I go 24-15, I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm
good.
Regardless of the outcome now, unlike Canyons, I don't have the pressure to finish. I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to dominate to the best of my ability because that's the contract I signed with myself. But I'm proud of myself either way because I know that at the end of the day, as I mentioned very early on this podcast, like, my success is my sobriety. So as long as I finish that race and I don't crack a bud, we're good to go. Like, we're good. As long as as long as I'm not sitting there drinking whiskey at the fire after, it's going to be a good day. And then I'm going to come home on Monday and my kids aren't going to care what I did. My students aren't going to care. Like, I'm the only one that really, really cares. You don't care.
Right.
My followers on Instagram don't care if I go 24 or 27 hours. Like,
no.
I really needed to realize that at the end of the day, the only person that really cares is you. I don't have sponsors to please.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I can go on a song and dance all night about, I could have done this time. I could have done that time. And at the end of the day, they don't care. Them.
Yeah. That's so important too, to realize that. Cause like, I know I used to race cars. I will say semi-professionally. I was sponsored racing cars. And so I had commitments I had to do. And it got to a point being a sponsored, I won't say athlete, a driver. I mean, drivers are athletes, but
yeah, they are.
They are. But it got to a point where it took a lot of the fun out of it because it was so stressful because I had to perform. Yeah. And like, when you put that pressure on yourself as a sponsored athlete, like these elite runners that are out there running these races, that it's their livelihood and their careers on the line, that it puts so much stress on it, and it can take the fun away and the enjoyment. And that's one thing I've personally learned over the last, probably more so in the last 2 years of running, that it's like, yes, I want to do my best. And I always want to give my best in every race and try to improve upon whatever I did before. That's just who I am. And I always want to improve. But at the same time, I'm not going to let it ruin me if I don't beat my PR at, some race that I did before. It's like, that's not the bigger picture, but it's just, you got to have fun. You got to enjoy what you do, or else it's like, why are we doing it?
I'm ready for a break from training, not from running. Because as you know, there's a difference between training and just staying fit.
100%. Yeah.
That's how it's almost taper time. I'm hanging on by a thread right now, man. And, I don't know when this will come out, but it's going to be in the near future. I'll probably be in a much better mental state. But yeah, just know today on the 11th of October, man, I am the race on the 26th. I'm hanging on by a thread right now. I got to jump in the sauna after this and do some heat training. And I used to love the sauna. And now I'm like, I don't want to go back in that damn box.
Right. Well, it's good you're doing that. You're talking about force specificity, and that's part of it, is that heat. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm ready for the.
You mentioned taper. Mm-hmm. What kind of taper are you doing? Are you a 2-week taper guy, a 7-day, 9-day?
Yeah, shorter taper the better for me, and I kind of go by feel. So, I mean, some perspective. I'm 2 weeks out, so I'll probably run about 80 miles this week, and then I'll probably cut it back in half next week to 40 or so. With the way I train, I love long weekends on fatigued legs. So my daily mileage will be 7 to 8 during the week, but like today was 15, tomorrow's 30, and then Sunday will be another 15. So I'll get 100K in the next 3 days, and that's kind of like
Nice.
how I've always trained, and that's where I really grow my mileage is on my long weekends, that back-to-back day. I've pretty much been trying to get a 50K in every single weekend for the last couple weeks or so.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And different than I used, like a lot of road stuff, a lot because I'm trying to run faster for longer, knowing that I don't need to worry about those long grind hikes and things, and really pushing carbs for that higher intensity that I hope to push. And then next week I'll probably drop that in half, go from 80 to 40. I taper with the same intensity but lower volume. So I'll still do my speed session on Tuesday. I'll still do my heavy strides on Thursday. And then I'll still have like some sort of, race pace block in my long run next week, which will go down from 50K, probably cut that in half as well, but maybe like a 15, 18. And then race week, I kind of just run if I feel like it. It's all, I think a big part. And like I said, I'm hanging on by a thread mentally. Physically, I feel awesome.
Yeah.
But I think next week I'll like taper physically. And then the week after will be a mental taper where, I'll still eat a lot because I want that nutrition, but I won't focus so much and bring mental stress to, all right, I got to get a shakeout. I got to do this. I got to do that. It'll more be like, hey, Tara, like, I'm just going to go out and just run for 30 minutes. I'll be right back. Or, I'm just going to hop on the bike for 20 minutes because as you know, we're not, even now, all the adaptations have pretty much been made. I'm just trying to keep myself from going crazy, and I'm trying to keep my legs loose and from locking up. But the race is on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. I probably won't run Friday. I might run Thursday, but that's a travel day for me. So I'll probably run like Monday's my usual rest day. So I'll run Sunday. I'll take off on Monday. Maybe I'll run Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'll probably shut it down for the week. But shorter taper, the better for me. But I think it depends on what you're racing. On a marathon, on a hard on a hard marathon push, I'll take 3 weeks because with that higher intensity, I feel more beat up. I feel like I need more recovery. My hamstrings are a little bit tighter than now where it's been just more muscular fatigue. My ligaments and joints don't hurt so much. Like tomorrow's 50K is going to be so nice and easy. Probably go like 5.5 hours, take it super nice and slow. And those types of days, I don't really feel like I need, my recovery is very good. Even at my old age, my recovery is pretty good. I sleep really well. I take care of myself. I eat well. I'm sober. So my recovery seems to be pretty good. So I don't really need that much time to taper, in my opinion. We'll find out.
Yeah. And that's so important. As we get older, I think we're pretty close. We're pretty close in age.
I'll be 43 in March. Yeah. 43.
Okay, well, I'm 40. So I'll be 41 in January. So not too far apart.
2 years apart.
It's so important. The older we get, the recovery, the sleep, like you mentioned, eating well, you being sober. I mean, just so important for your holistic health and taking care of your body. It's just, I didn't used to think it played that big of a factor when I was younger because it's like, shoot, you're 25, you can do anything, and then do the next day and do it again. It's like, you can't do that at 40.
And I'll say for anybody listening, sleep is number one, man. Sleep
100%.
is most days. You can look at my Garmin, like most days I'm getting 8 to 10 hours every single day. I don't know how these guys do it on less sleep. And maybe
I know
because they're in their 20 somethings, but I'm a cold plunge a couple days a week. I'm a sauna a couple days a week, but sleep, I do not, these darn Mets, luckily they've been playing 5 o'clock games, but I think next week they play a little bit later. Like I'm going to have to miss some Met games because, sleep is just it's got to be a top priority for you, and you got to be able to sleep, or I think it's almost not even worth training,
Yeah. Well, I don't want to end the podcast without talking about that plaque behind you there. For people watching on YouTube, you can see he's obviously got a nice play button back behind him there. So for those that don't know, Brad, tell them where they can find you on YouTube on your multiple channels.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that's not a running plaque. I think my running YouTube channel, which kind of has a little bit of very similar to yours. I even, like I said, I told you before we started recording, I've been watching you for a long time, and my running channel, Brad Finn Trains, because somebody else had Brad Trains, but like the actual train, like the Choose You train. So Brad Finn Trains has like all my races. You can go on and see the full video of SP50 of me getting my butt kicked.
Right.
I think there's a 30-minute canyons video. Rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon did really, really well.
Yeah, that was good.
And then some other reviews I've done. So that's like my little channel. And then I started on YouTube back in 2017 talking personal finance, how to get out of debt, living below your means, living frugally. You're in Colorado Springs, right?
I am. Mhm.
Yeah. So actually the first public speaking engagement I ever did as a public speaker was in Colorado Springs,
Oh, cool.
at this thing called Camp 5 Financial Independent. And it was at like I want to say like not a monastery. I don't know how to like describe it, but like it was some sort
Was
of
it up on top of a mountain?
yeah, it was like it was right by the incline, and it was like I'll look it up and I'll get to you. But anyway, but the Colorado Springs is the first place I actually passed out at the
Yeah.
top of Pikes Peak.
Nice.
By that. But yeah, so personal finance was like my bread and butter. That's what that plaque is. And then I have a couple other channels that I'm a physics teacher. I teach high school physics during the day. That's like my W-2 job. And so I have a math and physics tutor. My wife teaches calc. So if anybody needs help in physics or math, you can always reach out. So I have a math and physics channel that's got a plaque that's in a closet. That's not hanging up anywhere. And then yeah, I've dabbled with other ones. I've had a couple podcasts now. One with personal finance started with a great buddy of mine, JJ Buckner. And now I have the 50K Ready podcast. So you can find me at 50kready.com. I think that's like the easiest way. Instagram, Brad Trains. We just hit 5,000 followers. Let's go.
Nice.
And, yeah. And then I have a faceless, a really, really big faceless YouTube channel that was supposed to be like a joke for dropshipping that went kind of viral and kind of blew up. But if you want to see like the personal finance side, you could just search. If you Google Brad Finn, I think my finance videos is the first thing that comes up. But yeah, and like I said, math and physics. I don't think my face is really in any. Maybe my early math and physics videos, like I had my face in the corner of the whiteboard, but there's been a lot of people that have watched like a personal finance video and left a comment like, "Hey, by chance, do you have a physics channel? Because the voice I swear to God, it's your voice, and I couldn't pick up on it." And I'm like, yeah. So I've done a lot of weird things. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I always loved YouTube. As I mentioned, I owned a CrossFit gym, I owned a brewery, and then I had this media company, and that's what kind of made me want to do the running thing. Mostly because with personal finance, I really started that channel as accountability too. I had a bunch of debt and I wanted to change that. And I was like, I'm going to tell people I'm going to go debt free. And then I'm going to tell them how I got debt free.
Nice.
And then, so when I got to the running stuff, I'm like, I'm going to try and lose 100 pounds and I'm going to try and run 365 days. And the only way I'm going to do is if I tell everyone I'm going to do it and they hold me accountable. And here we are having a grand old time.
Yeah.
This is actually, I will be honest, this is the first, I've probably been a guest on 50 podcasts or so. This is my first time ever being on a running podcast.
Okay.
So this one's going to go in my journal as a really, really big day for me. I've been looking forward to it. And like when you asked me, I was like giddy, like a little boy that just got asked to prom. I was like, I feel like I made it. Like somebody asked me to be on a running podcast. So like, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity, man. It's been just that I could stay on and talk running and talk about things in general. As a podcast, this is long form content is the way to go. I hate TikTok. I hate Instagram Reels. I hate them. Like these real genuine conversations are, so valuable to me, and they just mean so much to me.
Yeah, and you got YouTube going, increasing the limit of shorts now to 3 minutes. I'm like, well, why even call it a short? It's basically getting close to log form.
I'm almost kind of glad that YouTube Shorts never really picked up on. They never really picked up because, when everyone. I mean, I grew my personal finance channel before shorts was even a thing. Like if I have a short on that channel, it's probably like 3 of them that my virtual assistant at the time was like, you got to do that. And she cut it up and put it on there. But like, I'm so glad that I never felt that. And I've done it on the running channel and I've had a couple do really, really well, but they don't bring, I'm all about small community. And like, even this video, this reel that got 2 million views, my channel on Instagram doubled. I went from 2,000 to 5,000 in 3 weeks.
Wow.
But my engagement with my audience is really still the same.
Exactly.
If I post like a question thing in a story, I still get the same amount of comments. So I never, if there's one thing that plaque taught me, that I've had that plaque now for maybe 3-4 years, and having a really, really big Instagram in the personal finance with over 6 figures in followers. There's one thing that I learned early, which was good, is like the follower count doesn't matter, the type of follower does. And I would much rather have 5,000 people that are super engaged and add value to your life, because I don't want to just give to the audience. I want to take back. I want to be in DMs with people. I want to hear their successes. I want to be a part of that. I answer every comment on every reel. I think that's way more important than having a couple videos go viral and having 50 or 100,000. I mean, it's good for brands and getting deals and things like that and clout. But at the end of the day, as far as like personal satisfaction, I'm all about having small, tight knit communities. And those, I mean, some of my best friends, I mean, I've only had the Ryan channel for 2 years, and I have some people that, I'm going to be friends with for the rest of my life because of that. And so that I owe that to Instagram and the small community.
Yeah, it's a small community, really, like the running. But yeah, I've met people through YouTube that I've never actually met them in person, like only virtually. But yet, like they're great friends. People I text in, in the opposite side of the country that we just chat about not even like running stuff, and they're great friends. It's insane. The YouTube community and then like the running YouTube community is so small. And it's tight knit, and it's awesome.
This community is way better than the personal finance community. I'm not knocking the person. Yeah, just because like I feel like people just all they wanted was like teach me how to get rich quick. Where this is a little bit like more of a band of brothers, and like the struggles that people have gone through. Like you see somebody with a hunt, like I see all your buckles behind you, and I'm like, man, that is a lot of suffering back there. And like now, one of my proudest things about being able to finish and being blessed enough to finish the 100 is now I know, I know what you went through. But dude, so my podcast with JJ Buckner, we did 50 episodes before I even met him in person. We met in person, did our first live episode, and like people thought we were like lived around the block from one another, but he lived in Missouri, and we met on YouTube, and we started with FaceTimes, and then I think my wife like heard us talking. She's like, you guys need to record that. That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. And then we started a podcast.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, one question I did want to circle back to with running is, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me and if I'm wrong here, but obviously you had issues with alcohol and drugs, and so might say an addictive personality. Yeah. And then you had the running streak, which you mentioned was another type of addiction essentially, and now running. Do you think running is, I mean, I know the answer to this myself personally, but do you think it has become the new addiction?
I had to fight one addiction with another. And but I will tell you, like, it scares me a little bit knowing that. And I get criticized a lot for how much I race, and I race a lot. But I think what people don't realize is I'm racing to satisfy a need as more of like a distraction. Like this is the first big race that I'm like, when I finished Grindstone, I had already signed up for Canyons. Like there was already something next. This is the first big race that I'm doing where I don't have anything next on the calendar.
Oh, okay.
And there's reasons for that, but mostly I want to try and enter some lottos this year and maybe try and get into some really, really big races. I don't want to plan a schedule until I kind of know. So December, hopefully we'll clean that up. But I've told my close friends that like, we need to do Javelina. We need to take a little bit of time to recover. And then we need to get back to being consistent. We don't need to train, but I am very manic, and I can easily turn a week of rest into a month of rest into I don't run anymore. I just know, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm all in. I love this, but I have to, at the end of the day, know what my demons are. And my friends know, like, if I'm not back and running again by Thanksgiving, like we got to get going. And I signed up for a backyard ultra in early December, just as kind of like one of those little carrots, like, hey, let's get going and get moving again after the race.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And maybe I've noticed this in running because a lot of ultra runners, I mean, you've listened to podcasts. Anyone out there, you see a story of some runner, probably 8 out of 10 of them have struggled with addiction of some kind in their past. It just
Yes.
seems to be a big part of the running community.
Mm-hmm.
And when you train, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months for a specific race, and then you accomplish that goal and you get your buckle, there can be a very big letdown and depression at the end of that, where it's like, well, now what? Like, I trained so hard for this and it's over. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So having that like bounce back race on your calendar, it can be very important, because it's like,
It really
there's
is.
something else coming, and mentally it's like, all right, I can take this rest, but I got to get back to training. I got to
And
get back.
I learned the post race blues from Ironman, because I was very,
Yeah.
very similar thing there, especially to like you'd not only like Ironmans, as I mentioned, were over the summer. So like a lot of times you'd finish the race and it would go right into winter and you're just like, ah. But I
Right.
think one thing that's helped combat that a little bit is that every trail race is so different that
Yes.
like I don't feel that when I finished Ironman, I was like, you really can't make it much harder. Like you can't. I know what to expect. Can't really change
Yeah.
it. Where now I know that like, yeah, I can finish Javelina and I could say I ran 100, but I haven't done a huge mountain race, or I haven't done a race in Europe, or they're all going to be very different. So I don't
Yeah.
have the same level of accomplishment that I had when I finished Ironman, which still makes me hungry for more, even though I don't feel like, I'll tell you personally, as of today, like I have no interest in the 200s. I have no
Yeah.
interest in them. Like Cocodona does nothing for me. Moab right now, my buddy's doing it. It does nothing for me. So many people are like, Brad, I want to see you at the Arizona 300. It does nothing for me. And the
Yeah.
reason it does nothing for me just yet is because I feel like I have so much work to do in the 100,
Yeah.
and there's no need to push for like, I still want that validation. And frankly, I don't know what that validate. Maybe it'll be going 20, like maybe I go sub 24 and I feel like I did it in the 100-mile distance, and then I want to go up. We'll find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But as of right now, because of how different they all are, there's no validation. But those blues, man, they're gonna be there, and they happen so fast. And as somebody that is dealing with this addiction, like for me, it's not just stopping running. For me, it's stopping running and picking up a drink.
Right.
And
Yeah.
those things, they make, there's a part of me that wants this race to come, but there's a part of me that's like knows that the days after and the weeks after are going to be just as big of a battle for me. And like maybe that makes me sound weak, or like I have no problem being vulnerable about that, but like I know it's going to be tough going into the holidays, and it's like, everyone's eating, drinking, and being merry in the holidays. Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
my anniversary is in there, like it's just all these things. And
Right.
running is definitely keeping me on a good path. It's humility and it's struggle. Those are the things I love the most about it. And yeah, when Javelina's done, man, who knows what will be next? But there will be a next, and there will be a next quickly. There'll be a next very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last question I'm going to ask you. You mentioned it earlier. I needed to ask you later in the podcast. I got to ask it then. So what's harder, an Ironman or running 100 miles?
Dude, good. Hopefully it's at the end. So anybody that doesn't like me already is already logged off. Dude, ultra marathon is exponentially harder than any Ironman. And
you're not the first person to say that too. I've heard that.
It doesn't matter if you're uncomfortable at swimming. It doesn't matter if you're a bad runner. It does not matter. And I've said this, and really the only people I'll debate on it are people that have done multiple of both, not just one of each,
Right.
whatever. Like I've done 4 Ironmans, and I've done now 25, 30 distances of 50K or greater and 100-miler. And I can say with 100% confidence, like if you told me today, and I've ridden my bike less than 25 miles this year, maybe less than 50 miles. I have not swam except for like splashing around with my kids this summer in a year and a half. If you said to me, Brad, next weekend, you need to complete an Ironman, there is not a shadow of a doubt I can knock that out, and knock it out well mid-pack.
Yeah.
Because the things that are going to get you an Ironman. Now, granted, if you can swim, right? There's people that literally can't swim. Okay. So you can look at the nuance if you want, but if you can swim, the big things in Ironman are muscular endurance. And frankly, 15 hours isn't a really long time anymore.
Right.
And nutrition. And I am a nutrition machine. I can do gels. I can do solid foods. I can eat and be full and still run. I can do liquid nutrition. You name it. I could do hot. I mean, I remember when I did Ironman Lake Placid, and they were telling me like this is the hardest bike course in the country, like hardest Ironman bike course ever. Since then, some have come up, and I remember that, and I went and looked. It had 3,100 feet of climbing, 3,100 feet, and the run had like 1,300 of rolling, And I'm thinking to myself, so I think that anybody that's done 100-miler or is training for 100-miler could knock out an Ironman. No questions asked.
That's awesome.
But if you ask a guy that just finished an Ironman, even high up, we're talking like 12, 13 hours, even a Kona qualifier to next weekend go do 100, it ain't happening, bro. It's not, it is not happening. You could give an Ironman triathlete, like the world championship of Ironman is in a couple weeks, or maybe it's even this weekend coming up. The guy that wins that race, the best Ironman in the world, if you said to him right after the race, like he didn't know before, you said to him right after the race, I need you to go out and run canyons in a week with 18,000 feet of elevation change and 23,000 feet of descent, he ain't doing it, bro. He's not going to make the time cut. There's very, very few humans that would be able to do that. And for that, like, I'm not taking away the difficulty of Ironman.
Oh, it's no, definitely not
difficult.
Yeah.
But even 100K, 100-miler definitely is exponentially harder.
There's just 100, because like 100K
to even 100K, man. Even
100Ks are difficult, but like for me, like I didn't get that pain in my first 100-miler until like mile 70. So after the 100K distance, like at 70 miles, my shins felt like they were going to break in half and they were going to fall off and I was going to be left with nubs.
Yeah.
So like 100K,
it's just it's a different type of suffering. In Ironman, like you get cramp, you get the biggest problems you're going to see in Ironman, which are mostly nutrition based from my experience, are the issues that you'll have early on in a race.
Right.
You are never going to get to a point where you are talking to yourself in ways that you've never talked to yourself before in an Ironman. You're never going to ask yourself, you're never going to be like in the marathon at the end of the Ironman and be looking up at the heavens and saying, God, take me now. Like it's not gonna happen. Or, you are never going to be so nauseous, but like, know you need to eat and have GI distress. Like, your body is just not going to shut down like that. Now, are there rare cases in Ironman? Yeah, maybe. But I'm talking like general blanket statement across all athletes across the whole world. Just the suffering is different. And I don't think a lot of Ironman triathletes that have never done a big ultra like that understand not the physical part. The physical part, fine. Like, you're a world-class athlete. You're physically capable of getting through 100 miles. But I don't think people are mentally prepared for the difficulty. And for that reason, not physical, but for the mental suffering and for the new type of suffering you've never felt.
Right.
Ultra running is harder than Ironman. And call it ultra hiking if you want, man. Go out and run. Go walk 100 miles. Tell me about your hallucinations. Tell me about them.
Right. Exactly.
Even if you never get a blister, like, I'm putting all like body hurt aside. Like, I mean, your quads can lock up on the bike, but you think your quads lock up on the bike. And your quads do not lock up like they will at mile 90 when you haven't eaten in 16 hours,
Right. Yeah. Because you've been vomiting every like 20 minutes.
But with that said, I want to do an Ironman again. And then maybe it's been a long time. It's been almost 10 years since I did one. So maybe it got super hard, but
well, you know what you need to do is you need to now, don't train for an Ironman. Don't go swim. Don't go bike.
Yeah.
You need to go hop into an Ironman. Like you just said, that if you can run 100 miles, you should be able to do an Ironman. You should just go do it.
I have an outstanding wager with some of my friends that still believe that Ironman's harder. I said that if I'm not within 8 weeks of 100, if you pay for my entry and you get me there, I want all expenses paid. I'll knock it out. And if I finish over 13 hours, then I'll reimburse you. And
Nice.
I am confident you can pick the hardest race in the country. You don't give me 2 weeks. I just want it all expenses paid. I will do an Ironman. And that goes for anybody. You want to call BS on that? If I don't go 13 hours, I'll reimburse you. But like, it's so insignificant. And I'm not talking trash on it, but I'm just saying it's not worth the time to like dedicate a training block to triathlon. It's kind of like why I backed off strength training. It's like, if I have time to strength train a lot, I'd rather just go run. So
Well, that would make a good YouTube video if somebody does that. Pays for your trip, you go out and do it. That'd be awesome.
Like I said, call Cap on me if you want. Like, say, hey, Brad, you don't even. I got the bike. I'll put air in the tires. They're definitely flat now. But if you're like, hey, Brad, I signed you up for Chattanooga, and it's in 3 weeks, and you got to go knock it out in under 13 hours. Money in the bank.
That's awesome, man. I want to see that. I want to see it happen. So somebody pay for his trip. Oh man. All right, Brad. Well, we could talk forever, man. This has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed it, but we got to end or people are just going to be like falling asleep or something. Well, probably not. This has been a good conversation. So, but man, I really do appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome. And I'm going to be looking forward to seeing how you're doing at Javelina. I won't be able to follow you live because I'm going to be out crewing my wife that same weekend. She's running a 100-miler as well.
Yes.
So, got to go
get
crew
your
her.
wife into that, man. And my wife's like 50K ready and that's all I need.
I'll tell you, it was FOMO.
She's starting to dabble, like, maybe a 50 miler, maybe.
Oh, that's it then. She's hooked. It's already too late.
She's right there. She's so close. She's just not. She's not competitive. She's super fit, and she's a really, really good 50K trail runner and loves it, and just maintains fitness at 30-40 miles a week.
Yeah,
but like she doesn't have that like internal. She won't get FOMO. Like she's not coming to Javelina. I'm like, you don't want to come? It's a party in the desert. She's like, nah, you're good. Go bring your drop bags. Have a good time. I'll see you on Monday morning.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, if she's already running 50Ks, I mean, just give her time. She'll probably get there.
She's a little bit younger than me. I'm just waiting for her to mature up to the bigger distances.
There you go. All right, man. Well, it has been awesome, Brad. And everybody go check out Brad Finn Trains on YouTube. Is also his finance channel, Brad Finn as well.
Yep.
And follow him on Instagram. And we'll look forward to seeing how you do at Javelina. Good luck. And I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the future, man.
Thanks. I appreciate you.
All right, man. Have a good one. If you enjoyed this episode of The Adventure Jogger, please consider joining our Patreon and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok for more content like this. Without your continued support, we would not be able to produce this type of content. So thank you so much to everyone that has listened, followed along, subscribed, liked, commented, you name it, donated on Patreon. Thank you.